we go, episode 6 of The Elephant in the Room with Bradley Devlin. I, of course, am your humble host, Bradley Devlin. Thank you for listening wherever you may be, however you may be listening, Spotify, SoundCloud. We're glad you're here, and I'm rushing this intro because we've got a lot to get to today. A lot of controversy happening on Berkeley's campus because Ann Coulter's speech that happened last night, as well as a breakdown of Elizabeth Warren's economic policies that you're not going to want to miss. And we're going to break down a lone conservative article that generated some controversy on the interweb. But first, let me tell you about TPUSA's Student Action Summit. It's happening again this year from December 19th through the 22nd. And as of now, the confirmed speakers are Donald Trump Jr., Charlie Kirk, Ben Shapiro, Rand Paul, Dan Crenshaw, and others. Folks, these are just the confirmed speakers. You know there is going to be more, a lot of big things happening there. So if you're interested in attending, go to www.tpusa.com/event/student action summit for the attendance application. Financial aid is available. Again, go to tpusa.com/event/student action summit for more information. All right, let's hop right into campus craziness. And of course, we're going to be talking about Ann Coulter's lecture last night at UC Berkeley. In the weeks leading up to the event, there have been protesters calling her, myself, and the members of the Berkeley College Republicans fascists, white supremacists, and racists. And video evidence from the Berkeley College Republicans depicted leftists destroying Berkeley College Republicans' advertisements and property, arguing that her presence threatens the safety of a lot of students. Groups like BAM have been telling students that white supremacist Ann Coulter is coming to Cal to promote ethnic cleansing in the service of the fascist regime in power. And of course, if you watched the event last night, if you heard anything about the event, or if you know anything about my organization, the Berkeley College Republicans, you know we're not fascists, we're not white supremacists, we're not in any way, shape, or form advocating for ethnic cleansing. Oh my God, that is just terrible. And it's just a disgusting lie told by the left. If you've ever wondered about the moral bankruptcy, if you're ever thinking that the left is trying to seriously take the moral high ground, just remember that they're calling college Republicans advocates for ethnic cleansing. So there's a lot of background behind the Ann Coulter event happening this year in 2019. If you don't know the complete story, let me break it down and unpack it for you. So the Berkeley College Republicans and YAF sued Berkeley in 2017 for canceling an Ann Coulter lecture, as well as other speakers, due to an unwritten high-profile speaker policy that was a violation of the First and 14th Amendment rights of myself and other conservative students on campus. The university refused to provide an accessible venue and attempted to postpone the event for alleged safety concerns, forcing unreasonable expectations on the students and the speakers based on the right-wing and conservative viewpoints being espoused. According to YAF at the time, the Berkeley students organizing the event did everything right and confirmed a date, and a contract was sent to the school. The Berkeley administration had 6 weeks to prepare and secure a proper venue, and they failed to do so. Administrators used a vague and unwritten high-profile speaker policy to force all conservative speakers to give their presentations before 3 p.m. when most students are in class, and demanded the event be hosted at a venue that is not easily accessible for most students. The university cites as its reason for canceling the lecture its high-profile speakers policy. In recent weeks, obviously the statement coming from 2017, administrators used this unwritten policy to cancel events featuring two conservative speakers for YAF, Miss Coulter and David Horowitz. During the same time period, administrators permitted events featuring leftists Vicente Fox Quesada, former president of Mexico, and Maria Chaveste, former advisor and White House deputy chief of staff to President Clinton, to proceed without interference. This discrepancy is telling. The school then decided unilaterally to postpone the event until the fall of 2017, citing safety concerns. The decision came with still plenty of time to make adequate arrangements to protect the speaker, campus community, and outside guests. So given all this history and the hype surrounding the Ann Coulter event that happened last night, as well as the hype surrounding Ann Coulter's event 2 years ago, I decided to catch up with my friend and current president of the Berkeley College Republicans, Matt Renau, yesterday, just hours before the event. So without further ado, here is our interview. All right, joining me just hours before the Ann Coulter event at UC Berkeley is president of the Berkeley College Republicans and chairman of CFCR, the statewide organization for college Republicans in California, Matt Renau. Matt, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Brad.
All right, so Ann Coulter, come tonight. What should we expect?
Well, we should expect a very interesting presentation on immigration to the United States. It's kind of Ann's specialty, and it's something that we've been looking forward to for a few years. So we expect a good presentation and a good question and answer period.
Awesome. Yeah, for me, I mean, obviously, you guys know me. I used to be president of the Berkeley College Republicans. I'm now serving as a spokesperson, so I've been doing my part in pushing this event on campus. And really, one of the things that we've been focusing on with messaging, and I think Matt would agree, is that Anne, her book Adios America, when it came out, it was one of the most influential works in then candidate Donald Trump's immigration policy and immigration rhetoric. And so I think it's really, really important for liberal students to come out to this event too, because uh, they're so crazy about the immigration issue, especially on campus, and they're so crazy about the current actions of this administration that they really should come out and see Ann Coulter speak. What would you say to a liberal student who refuses to go see Ann Coulter speak tonight based on political disagreements?
I think they're missing out on a viewpoint that is, if ever, very rarely presented on the Berkeley campus. I think part of the mission of higher education is to challenge students and to get them to think critically. And when you have a campus like Berkeley and many campuses, most campuses throughout the nation that are just overwhelmingly dominated by leftists, you don't hear these alternative viewpoints that someone like Anne brings. So I think they're missing out on opening their mind to alternative ideas and alternative viewpoints that they need to consider.
Now, we've not only received pushback from the left, obviously. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But we've also had some pushback from the ultra Trump right because of Anne's statements in the lead up to this event. Explain to, if I was a Trump supporter who was now skeptical of Anne because Anne said Trump's got to go, why Anne's saying that. I mean, I think I have a pretty good idea why Anne's saying these things because she cares about immigration solely. But what would you say to those individuals who are refusing to come out because of her statements in the past 2 weeks about Trump's willingness to do a deal on DACA?
Yeah, and it's not just the past 2 weeks. I think there's been kind of a line drawn between those two individuals. For a while now. I think Trump unfollowed her on Twitter at least a year ago. But I don't think Anne is a never Trumper. I don't think she's anti-Trump at all. I think she's just trying to do her job to hold his feet to the fire on an issue that was so central to his campaign and is so central to millions of Americans throughout the country, which is immigration and how their jobs are getting shipped overseas and they're importing foreign workers with H-1B visas and their wages are going down. So I think Anne wants Trump to succeed and wants to see the country do well and wants to see him fulfill his promises. And that's what she's doing when she comes out and criticizes him on Twitter for saying that we should make a deal with DACA, the DACA recipients after he says, well, a lot of them do have criminal backgrounds. It just seems very counterproductive on his end to say things like that. And so I think what Anne's just trying to do is hold his feet to the fire.
And I think that that's a very important thing to know about Anne is Anne's willing to hold people's feet to the fire, even if that means that she gets a lot of backlash for it. And sometimes, with her messaging, deservedly so. And that's probably an area where you and I can disagree. But I do think of this quote a lot from Anne when I consider the beef, I guess if we're going to call it beef, between President Trump and Ann Coulter. And it's, there are a lot of bad Republicans, but there are no good Democrats, right? Ann Coulter's not telling people to not vote for President Trump based on the fact that he's willing to do a DACA deal, because the alternative is a Bernie Sanders, an Elizabeth Warren, a Pete Buttigieg, who have completely bought into the AOC side of the party.
Well, and the alternative on the Republican side is someone like Marco Rubio, who just wants to increase immigration. And that's something that millions of Americans don't want. The Republican Party, the RNC, needs to listen to its base. They do not want to increase immigration, legal or illegal. They want to obviously shut down illegal immigration, and they want to shut down and limit legal immigration too. So I think it's important that our elected officials, listen to their constituents, and that's what Anne's trying to do here.
Okay, now we have to talk about the radical left on campus. They've been losing their minds. I mean, just absolutely losing their minds.
Yeah.
What has the Berkeley College Republicans gone through in the lead up to this event? We've seen it on Twitter, but I want to hear it firsthand.
Yeah, so I mean, we've had a lot of events since you and I have been students here. When the Berkeley College Republicans brought or attempted to bring Milo, we were freshmen, and then we attempted to bring David Horowitz, and that was shut down. Then we attempted to bring Anne in April of 2017, and that's when we launched our lawsuit. And then we brought Ben Shapiro in that fall, and that Ben event that we had was really the last time we had seen a large organized protest against one of our speakers. After Ben, we brought people like Rick Santorum, Dennis Prager. We brought Charlie Kirk,
Dave Rubin, Heather
Dave
McDonald.
Rubin, Heather McDonald, and we didn't see um, anything at all really protesting our event. But now, in the last week or so, Berkeley Antifa, BAM, which stands for By Any Means Necessary, both of those groups have picked up our event and have circulated flyers urging people to rally and protest it. It's Going Down, which is a far left blog run, I believe. I don't know if it's a nationwide thing or just a Bay Area thing, but they've circulated it and have been running stories about the Berkeley College Republicans and Ann Coulter insinuating that we're white nationalists and that we have ties to the alt-right and this and that. So it's really picked up. People have been tearing down our flyers, obviously, and getting our faces when we confront them about it. So interested to see what's going to happen tonight.
Yeah, I want you to talk a little bit about those flyers. I mean, I think that we could have a running timer on every single time we put our flyers up, and it wouldn't go over 15 minutes. I mean, these people are just so deranged, they keep tearing them down. What is their reaction when you catch them on video? I mean, you guys got a great video. The Berkeley College Republicans got a great video of a protester tearing down these flyers. And it's similar to videos that we've seen across the country from deranged leftist students tearing down flyers for different speaking events, whether it's Ben Shapiro or Rick Santorum or Dennis Prager, but specifically Ann Coulter. I mean, they get caught on video and they know that they've done something wrong. I mean, what is usually their reaction?
They do, and I think the video you're talking about, one of our members confronted them, just was very calm, said, why are you tearing down our flyers? Like, you can come to the event, ask a question. And the person who was doing it, some woman, she seemed really embarrassed and kind of afraid that she was being recorded, and said, "Oh, I don't want to be recorded. Like, I'll stop tearing down your flyers." So she was really sheepish. But a lot of them, they get really angry and they walk away. And the other night I was out there and some guy who was tearing down our flyers and whatever, and he started walking away, and I called him a coward, and that really upset him. So I mean, when you confront these people,
you come here, coward. Yeah, the old Alex Jones.
Yeah, when you confront these people, they get really upset about it, like you've done something wrong to them, and that, like, how dare I question that they're tearing down our flyers. Anne posted 2 pictures on Twitter. I guess she had someone who was here on campus yesterday who took a picture 10 minutes, 2 pictures 10 minutes apart of one of the bulletin boards, like and there were flyers on one of them, and then 10 minutes later they were all torn down. Last night I was doing an interview with one of the local news stations, and they wanted some B-roll of me putting flyers up. And as we were going to walk over to put flyers up, there were people taking our flyers down. So I mean, it's just that's just the way Berkeley is.
Now I want to return back to the protest being organized by BAM, by Antifa, the chancellor. So I've reported on this for Campus Reform. The chancellor sent out a campus-wide email in support of the United Against Hate Week, and this email had a link to the events throughout the Bay Area for this United Against Hate Week, and it included an Islamophobia awareness workshop, as well as a candlelight vigil for lost transgender voices, as well as the United Against Hate rally happening, of course, right before and during the Ann Coulter event.
Co-hosted by the Cal Berkeley Democrats.
Right, co-hosted by the Cal Berkeley Democrats. Is this a new phenomenon where Cal Berkeley Democrats, in the past, they haven't disavowed any of these far-left violent organizations, but now they're actively working in cahoots with those organizations? Is that something that Berkeley College Republicans has seen before, or is this something new?
I don't recall seeing it in the past. The Cal Berkeley Democrats have really shifted, pretty far left since we've been here. You and I both know, former members who kind of strayed away from the group just because of how disillusioned they got with the direction they were taking. I mean, they don't really engage with us on any, events on campus. We used to host a great debate, which was a staple of the Berkeley campus for years, where the college Republicans and the college Democrats would engage in a debate every year, and they refused to engage with us on that. And so, I don't know what's going on with them. It's unfortunate that they're shifting this far left, and they don't want to, come and attend our event and ask Ann questions, because that's the purpose when we have events like this, is to, start a dialogue and have a conversation. We don't just want a bunch of right-wingers in the room saying, hey, Anne, I really like your position on immigration. And she just says, thanks, next question. Like, the point is to, get people who disagree with Anne in there and say, like, no, we shouldn't or limit legal immigration. We shouldn't, kick out the DACA students. We shouldn't, throw out the dreamers. We need to, provide protections for people coming across the border. And Anne should, come back and respond why she thinks that's wrong. That's the purpose of these events that we host. So it's unfortunate that they're just going to protest, and, we support their right to protest peacefully, obviously. But when you start, getting in the works with BAM and Antifa, that's really not good news.
And another important part is, it seems like the liberal establishment at UC Berkeley is now supporting people refusing to engage in dialogue on the basis of hateful and partisan rhetoric cannot foster a good sphere for dialogue. But do you think Ann Coulter is inherently hateful? Do you think Ann Coulter, it's more about the politics that Ann Coulter holds that they perceive as inherently hateful, or do you think that Ann Coulter is genuinely a hateful person? That's the first question. And the second question is, what do we do in order to restore what used to be great chambers of higher education where we could probe each other's ideas in genuine fashions instead of just reverting to our own echo chambers and playing the power dynamics game where we tear down and vandalize and sabotage one another?
Yeah. So the answer to your first question, no, I don't think Anne's hateful. I think they take policies that people hold, like, such as Anne, and they make it all about, the person's persona, and they think that her views are divisive or whatever. They're allowed to think that, and, whatever. And so they think she's a hateful person. That's what the left does, is they demonize people, and, they don't think that we're just wrong. They think we're evil and we're out to get them. The answer to your second question is a bit more complicated, because it's going to take a lot to change. And I don't know if it's something that can be changed, because leftism is so ingrained in the institutions, our higher education institutions across the country. Really, I think a big problem of it, which I don't think a lot of people are talking about, is tenure. So many professors receive tenure, and it really, the idea of tenure is very contrary to kind of a merit-based system of, you're a good professor, your students get good grades, they enjoy your class. You should, get a pay raise or continue teaching here, versus you're a bad teacher, but you've been here forever, so you get to stay teaching. And, when there's financial setbacks and we go into recession or whatever, the people who haven't been there as long are the first ones to get cut, even though they might be the best and, often are the most liked professors or lecturers or whatever. So when you get people like that who have been in the system for so long and are ingrained with this far left ideology, it makes it really hard to get conservative voices on campus. I think I could be just like throwing out a number here, but I thought I saw a statistic that was like the number of conservative to liberal professors on college campuses is like 1 to 14, 1 to 20 or something like that. So it's a really ingrained, like, leftism is really ingrained into our universities. So it's up to groups like college Republicans to bring these alternative viewpoints on campus, because their professors aren't doing it.
Awesome. Okay, last question before we have to get out of here. How does Trump win in 2020?
He keeps the same messaging that he had in 2016, that it's important to build the wall. And I think immigration is really the winning issue here. I think that's why he was so attractive in the Republican primaries, is because he had, such a different policy stance than all the other candidates. I think he needs to, put some action. How do I say this? He needs to put some work down on the southern border. I mean, he's been replacing a lot of, existing border fencing with the new and improved stuff, which is great. But he needs to really push hard, get some immigration hawks and the Department of Homeland Security in his cabinet and in the White House, and clear out all the never Trumpers that have infiltrated, and actually get some work done on the main issue that he ran on.
All right. Thank you so much, Matt. Good luck tonight. We are going to be very, very interested on how everything turns out when this interview is released on Thursday, the day after Ann Coulter's event. So we'll see if there's any national headlines made. But again, Matt, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Brad.
I hope you enjoyed that interview with Matt Renow, president of the Berkeley College Republicans. He does phenomenal work on Berkeley's campus, as well as throughout the state of California, being the chair of CFCR, the statewide organization for the College Republicans. So Again, I thank him for joining me on what is always a very, very busy day, the day of the event. Before we jump into Bradley's breakdown, where I'm going to be breaking down the atrocities that are Elizabeth Warren's economic policy as well as her taxation plans, let me tell you about YAF, Young America's Foundation, the group that first helped us host Ben Shapiro and Ann Coulter and David Horowitz in 2017. YAF has a ton of amazing opportunities ranging from Ben Shapiro at Baylor University to John Stossel at the University of Massachusetts Amherst coming out. So you gotta go learn from the best and brightest of the conservative movement about how to navigate crazy college campuses like the one I'm at right now, the importance of America's founding fathers, and so much more. They are frequently protested and they are never boring. So these events are not one to skip. So make sure to visit www.yaf.org/events to get the latest updates on the free YAF sponsored events at schools near you. We asked lone conservative contributor Joseph Chalfant about lectures hosted by YAF, and he said Young America's Foundation is focused on teaching students about individual liberty, traditional values, and free market solutions to current day problems. Their lectures provide students with the information they need to be successful conservative leaders in the classroom, in their communities, and in their professions. So again, a glowing recommendation from Joseph there, a glowing recommendation from myself, as well as the team at the Elephant in the Room. So visit www.yaf.org/events for more information. All right, now we're getting to the meat of this podcast. This might run a little long, but I need you to understand what Elizabeth Warren is proposing when she is proposing this radical left tax agenda, as well as her radical left economic policies. So if you haven't heard, Elizabeth Warren has a 5-year centralized plan for everything, right? Despite the fact that her tax plans fail to fund her social programs that she holds so near and dear to her campaign. And these social programs cover everything from government-sponsored childcare, relief of student loan debt, environmental initiatives, and healthcare. Of course, all under the creed of basic fairness, which of course is quite a creative definition of fairness that's coming from the far left these days. So what's the cost of some of these social programs? Well, Senator Elizabeth Warren is calling for $800 billion in additional federal funding for public education, a move that would exhaust the remaining revenue raised by her proposed wealth tax, even as she seeks new creative ways to finance her Medicare for All plan, which would cost tens of trillions of dollars in its first decade. Also, Elizabeth Warren has previously stated that her double taxation schemes would also pay for a $100 billion opioids plan, the creation of a $7 billion small business equity fund, and a $20 billion election security plan. But according to her own campaign estimates, revenue generated from the tax on inherited assets would fall about $27 billion short of what it would cost to finance those priorities for 10 years, not including Medicare for All. So despite the headlines in the mainstream media praising every one of Elizabeth Warren's glorious plans that she says are comprehensive but undercut the totality of their economic effect, her new system of taxation will infringe on the rights and economic opportunities of every American, especially middle-class Americans. Here is Elizabeth Warren's proposed new system of American taxation to pay for her robust and expensive social programs, according to Adam Michel over at the Daily Signal. Of course, this is a fairly comprehensive list of taxes we're about to break down, but they aren't her only proposed tax increases. Long story short, all of them boil down to the same conclusion. These plans would fail to completely fund her social programs while increasing taxes on the middle class and decrease opportunity for all Americans. So first, she'd implement a new payroll tax, which would mark the largest relative increase in taxes under her plan. The tax increase would raise a projected $8.8 trillion in payroll tax or mandatory premium payment to approximate what employers currently pay for healthcare benefits. Although the initial tax is proportional to actual healthcare spending as of right now, over time, taxes would equalize to the national average, which would increase taxes on employers who have kept healthcare costs low and reward employers who provide more comprehensive benefits. While it seems benevolent to reward employers who provide more comprehensive benefits, when you raise taxes on the half of employers below the national average for healthcare spending, their employees will be worse off, as increasing taxes means slower wage growth or even a deterioration in wages because wage earners bear the costs of these taxes imposed due to their employment. Then she proposed more IRS enforcement as a way to raise new revenue. But this is not as easy as it sounds. Not only would abundant IRS auditing increase the effective tax rate for families across the income distribution, it would most likely not lead to the trillions in increased revenue as Warren promises, because often rosy projections of new revenue from more IRS enforcement don't come to fruition due to the fact that the cost of implementing and complying with these new laws and policies are so steep. In fact, the regulatory costs have already been projected to swallow the increase in revenue due to the increase in IRS enforcement. Elizabeth Warren also proposed a plan that would make it more expensive for businesses to invest in American workers by eliminating expensing. By not allowing companies to deduct the full cost of new investments from their revenues, the plan would make businesses pay taxes on profits before the profits earned by their new investments come to fruition. And this, of course, makes many investments too costly for businesses, which not only results in lower levels of investment, but also lower productivity for workers and ultimately smaller wage gains. Elizabeth Warren, in all of her wisdom, has also proposed reversing what I consider to be one of the greatest achievements of the Trump tax cuts. She wants to raise the federal corporate tax rate back to 35% from where it lies now at 21% federally, which would be the highest rate in the developed world, making America an unattractive market for infant and growing companies. It would also tax American companies' worldwide profits, a move that simply would compound the effect of businesses growing and investing less. And this just doesn't affect those who own and operate the businesses at the top. It directly affects the working class. Every fiscal authority around the world believes that workers pay a portion of the corporate tax through lower wages. Reasonable estimates show that labor bears at least 75% of the revenue cost of the corporate tax. The highest in the world corporate tax rate surely would end the current economic expansion, depress new research and development, and end the current trend of businesses adding new jobs. Beyond that, Warren is proposing a new tax on all sales of bonds, stocks, or derivative. And this isn't a new idea like Warren proclaims it to be. The CBO consistently factors a tax program like this in its reports. The CBO report warns that the tax could have a number of negative effects on the economy, stemming from its effect on asset prices, the cost of capital to firms, and the frequency of trading. A financial transaction tax would increase rather than decrease market volatility. It would hurt digital traders, and it wouldn't raise as much revenue as projected. Ultimately, the tax also would be paid by American savers through lower investment returns and fewer economic opportunities, shifting their economic opportunities to riskier assets that promise higher returns to maintain the same level of profit. Elizabeth Warren is also proposing to change capital gains taxation, specifically on investment income for the highest income 1% of Americans. The proposal would require investors to pay higher rates on capital gains before the investment is actually sold. So if the value decreases, the taxes would be levied on phantom profit. This type of taxation is called market-to-market taxation. And it would be like asking Americans to pay taxes on the estimated increase in the value of their homes even if they haven't sold them yet, which of course is foolishness. According to the Tax Foundation, this change would increase the tax burden on savers and increase tax code complexity. And here's where we get to my biggest gripe, my biggest issue with the bevy of taxes, as I've listed out already, proposed by Elizabeth Warren. And that, of course, is her wealth tax. Her wealth tax is her most popular and championed tax plan within the mainstream media and the progressive Democratic base. She's even ripped off the Daily Wire's leftist tears tumbler, and she's begun to sell billionaire tears mugs to raise funds for her campaign based off of this wealth tax. And Warren's plan would impose a 2% annual tax on wealth above $50 million and 3% above $1 billion, which she then later doubled to 6% in an attempt to tax her way out of her massive spending proposals, namely Medicare for All. The tax would affect about 75,000 households and is estimated to raise $2.75 trillion over the first decade, according to economists Emmanuel Saenz and Gabriel Zuckman at UC Berkeley, which on the outset are very rosy estimates for generated revenue, and I'll get to why in just a second. But of course, this is a play from Senator Bernie Sanders' playbook, who has proposed and advocated for a similar tax for quite some time. Critics of the wealth tax, like myself, say that this is a fundamental departure from our current tax code, and it adds an entirely new and probably unconstitutional tax system on top of the already 70,000 pages of existing tax law. And while a 6% tax on billionaires may sound like a small fee to pay, its effects are monumental. For example, a 6% tax on net wealth earning a 5% return is equivalent to an income tax rate of 120%. And of course, that's in addition to the existing and proposed taxes on capital gains, profits, and wage income, which we've already discussed previously. So yes, the estimated revenue of the wealth tax would be 10 times the revenue that the current estate and gift taxes are projected to raise. But Elizabeth Warren is not only naive in thinking that her wealth tax would not only have the desired effect, but that it would defy the history of wealth taxes that have been previously imposed in European countries. In 1990, a dozen European states had wealth taxes, but today that number has fallen to 3. Why, you may ask? Well, let's look at Sweden. In Sweden, where they had a wealth tax of 1.5% on personal wealth over $200,000 for most of the 20th century, the wealth tax ended up distorting investment as the wealthy took on debt to buy tax-free assets. This means that strong lobbying interests can fight for certain assets to be taxed differently or not at all, which can lead to massive bubbles, particularly in real estate, where if you're old enough to remember 2008, bears for bad news. Even the relatively small Swedish wealth tax compared to Elizabeth Warren's plans drove out some of the country's most successful citizens, such as IKEA founder Ingvar Kamprad, who opted for Switzerland over Sweden due explicitly to overtaxation. The revenue created by the wealth tax never accounted for more than 0.4% of GDP, and in 2007, the government was forced to repeal the law. How about Germany? Well, in 1978, Germany placed a 0.5% and a 0.7% wealth tax on personal and corporate wealth. That rate rose to then 1% in 1995, but the Federal Constitutional Court struck down the wealth tax that year, and it was effectively abolished by 1997, which hints at the possibility for Warren's grand plan to be tied up and then ruled void by the courts because the founders banned direct taxes not apportioned by state population. Since then, the Germans have flirted with the idea of reimposing such a tax, but the IFO Institute for Economic Research found that in 2018, the reimposition of the wealth tax would, in the best case scenario, result in a lower long-run GDP of 5%, coupled with a decrease of unemployment of 2%, with business investment shrinking even more drastically. The report concluded that the wealth tax's burden is carried by virtually everyone, as indicated by the decline in GDP, investment, and employment. France also had a wealth tax, which began in 1982, that had a top tax rate of 1.5% on assets above 1.5 million. The tax was eliminated and then reimposed several years later. Since 2000, some 70,000 millionaires have left France, according to the South African research group New World Wealth. Again, Warren expects her wealth tax to raise somewhere between 2.7 and 3.7 trillion in the first decade, but France's experience tells a very different story. French economist Eric Pinchet found that in 2016, the wealth tax actually caused a net revenue loss since investment declined and hundreds of billions of euros were moved offshore. Thus, total tax receipts were at least 7.5 billion euros lower than they otherwise would have been. And in Austria, they found that imposing a wealth tax comes with an onerous burden on the administrative state to calculate the exact levy of the tax, and repealed their wealth tax in 1994. Now, the 3 still left in place today come from Spain, Switzerland, and Norway. In Spain, they taxed fortunes above 700,000 euros at 0.2%, rising to 2.5% at roughly 10.7 million euros. And does Sanders and Warren really want to argue that Spain should serve as the United States model for taxation given the current state of their economy? The answer, of course, is no. And in Switzerland, the wealth tax hits the middle class the hardest. It kicks in starting at the low 6 figures. Yeah, good luck selling that to Americans, Elizabeth Warren, because you will fail miserably electorally if you do so. Meanwhile, in Norway, they tax wealth starting at about $170,000 at 0.85%, but they can kind of get away with it, just like they've been getting away with garbage economic policies and decisions for decades due to the country's vast oil reserve. So what is the total result of Warren's newly imposed taxes? Well, her plan to increase the top income tax rate to 39.6% from 37%, impose a new 14.8% tax for Social Security, add an annual tax of up to 6% on accumulated wealth, and require rich investors to pay capital gains tax at the same rates as other income, even if they don't sell their assets, can result in rates of taxation over 100% for top-tier investors, according to Richard Rubin over at the Wall Street Journal. Rubin says, consider a billionaire with a $1,000 investment who earns a 6% return, or $60 received as a capital gain, dividend, or interest. If all of Warren's taxes are implemented, he could owe 58.2% of that, or $35 in federal tax. Plus, his entire investment would incur a 6% wealth tax, i.e. at least $60. The result, taxes as high as $95 on income of $60 for a combined tax rate of 158%. Of course, the tax rate would vary according to the investor's circumstances, but tax rate over 100% on investment income would be typical, especially for billionaires. Beyond the estimated 75,000 households that would be hit by the wealth tax, Mrs. Warren's capital gains plan would transform investing rules for the top 1%, which covers about 1.5 million households. Under Elizabeth Warren's plan, their unrealized capital gains outside retirement accounts would be taxed at 39.6%, just like ordinary income, plus a 3.8% investment income tax. Add that to her new 14.8% investment income tax to bolster Social Security, as well as state taxes, and combined tax rates could reach 70% in California and New York City. And the effective tax on business investment could actually be higher because these personal taxes would come after a company has already paid a corporate tax rate, which under Elizabeth Warren's new plan would be increased from 21% from anywhere between 35 and 45%. And of course, Rubin is precisely right when he breaks down the effect of such onerous rates of taxation. Economists generally think taxes on profits, capital gains, and dividends discourage investment and hurt economic growth. The Penn-Wharton Budget Model, a research group, estimates in a preliminary report that a 3% wealth tax above $50 million, which isn't exactly Elizabeth Warren's plan, but it's darn near close to it, would reduce the growth rate of gross domestic product over the next decade by an annual average of 0.2 percentage points, and the capital stock, which is all the equipment, structures, intellectual property that companies employ, by 4.3%. So to keep their fortunes from falling, billionaires would have to find higher returning investment, but higher returns would almost certainly come with greater risk. Moreover, if billionaires knew that there was high return stuff out there, they probably already would have had their money in it, said Kyle Palmerlew, who was until recently a tax analyst at the Conservative Tax Foundation. And if all else fails and billionaires and millionaires try to leave the US and take their money and invest it elsewhere, Warren is willing to impose a financial Berlin Wall by creating a 40% exit tax on assets above $50 million for people who renounce their citizenship. Yeah, so much for open borders, right? So what exactly is the impetus for the far left's attempt to completely revamp the American system of taxation? Well, Warren and other far-left candidates' messaging on income inequality is based on a ploy from both Donald Trump's and Bernie Sanders' campaigns in 2016. Both Trump and Sanders said the system is rigged. In the far-left's attempt to take the presidency in 2020, candidates like Warren and Sanders are arguing that the system, capitalism, is rigged because it produces income inequality. And while it's a clever political maneuver, as most of the country hates the ultra-rich elite and are concerned about income inequality, the economic consequences, as I've outlined, would be disastrous. Warren, Sanders, and company argue that not only is our tax system not progressive enough, which allows income inequality to emerge and persist, but that our tax system is not actually progressive at all. As such, all of Warren's new taxes, the increase on capital gains, the increase in the income tax, the increase in the corporate tax, the imposition of a wealth tax, as well as adding a new Social Security tax, aim to make the American tax system progressive again. However, the basis for their belief is rooted in a very clever sleight of hand from two Berkeley economists who are advising both Sanders and Warren on their tax policy. According to Lawrence Kotlikoff over at the Wall Street Journal, those economists that I mentioned previously, Emmanuel Saenz and Gabriel Zuckman of the University of California, Berkeley, assert in their book titled The Triumph of Injustice: How the Rich Dodge Taxes and How to Make Them Pay, that the US tax system is actually flat, that the middle class and poor pay as great a share of their income in taxes as the rich up until the 99th percentile. Kotlikoff, of course, rejects their analysis and points out three fundamental flaws. Kotlikoff says the biggest mistake they make is focusing on gross, not net taxes. They ignore transfer payments like Social Security, which are disproportionately paid to the poor, and in doing so, they mistake language for economics. To see the problem, consider a simple thought experiment. Joe, a minimum wage employee, earns $15,000 a year. The government taxes Joe $1,000 and transfers him $600, so that he pays $400 on net. In another scenario, Joe pays $10,000 in taxes and collects $9,600 in transfer payments. Again, he pays $400 on net. But in the first scenario, Saenz and Zuckman would report Joe's gross tax rate as a reasonable 6.7%, $1,000 over $1,500. $1,000 over $15,000. In the second, they'd call it an onerous 66.7%. The flaws in their methodology is even more obvious when you consider that American tax laws incorporate benefit subsystems and benefit laws incorporate tax subsystems. The federal personal income tax, for instance, includes the EITC, the Earned Income Tax Credit, a major transfer program designed for low-income wage earners. The Social Security benefit system includes the earnings test, which is a major tax. If the focus is on gross taxes, should the EITC be excluded and Social Security's earnings test included? Economists can't agree on that. But what they can agree on is we should look past the language and measure net, not gross taxes. Their second mistake is measuring progressivity on a 1-year rather than a remaining lifetime basis. That ignores the fiscal system's double taxation. Income earned, taxed, and saved this year will be subject to future taxation on interest, dividends, and capital gains. This omission disproportionately understates taxes for the rich, who save at a higher rate. The current year focus also understates benefits paid to the poor, since future benefits are a bigger share of their resources. Their third mistake is failing to adjust for age. The old have paid most of their lifetime in taxes, which makes them now look like tax cheats, particularly those who saved out of previously high-taxed labor income. With changing demographics, this problem will deeply confuse tax progressivity comparisons over time. Now, economic theory suggests there's a better way to measure fiscal progressivity. Include each and every federal and state tax and benefit. Measure net, not gross taxes. Focus on each age group separately. Add together the present value of each future year's net taxes, and measure a household's remaining lifetime net tax rate by dividing the present value of its remaining lifetime net taxes by the household's remaining lifetime resources, its current net wealth plus its human wealth, which is the present value of its future labor earnings. Now, Kotlikoff acknowledges that this is definitely a mouthful, but it's a crucial one. When he and Alan Auerbach, who is another Berkeley economist, took these factors into account, they revealed how Saenz and Zuckman have made a mockery of proper economic analysis. Their findings, based on the Federal Reserve's 2016 Survey of Consumer Finances, could not differ more than those from Saenz and Zuckman. Now, when Kotlikoff and Auerbach focused on 40-year-olds, they found that each dollar of pre-tax remaining lifetime resources for those in the top 1% of the resource distribution is taxed on net at a rate of 34.5%. For those in the top quintile, the average net tax rate is 28.4%. For those in the bottom quintile, every dollar of pre-taxed resources is matched by a 46.6% net subsidy. And they go on to say that taxes rise steadily to 4.2% for the second quintile, 12.6% for the third quintile, and 18.5% for the fourth. And the results are similar across age groups. So the ultimate conclusion from Kotlikoff and Auerbach is that far from being flat, the net tax rate facing middle-aged Americans rises rapidly with their resources, from negative 46.4% from the bottom 20% to positive 34.5% for the top 1%. So yes, the American tax system is still very, very progressive. And Democrats' open embrace of double and triple taxation schemes is based on faulty assumptions about the American system of taxation. But if you don't remember any of these facts and figures, remember this. America prospers when markets determine the allocation of resources, especially capital. That's why the American economy is the envy of the world. Our free market system has allowed capital to go towards companies, ventures, and technologies of tomorrow. And that innovation is squandered when the government usurps capital only for it to be wasted by the bureaucracy or redistributed inefficiently. When all else fails, the best argument against this type of taxation is a moral one. Double and triple taxation schemes are confiscatory taxes on the assets and the investments accrued from income that has already been taxed. Thanks for strapping in with me for that long Bradley's breakdown, but I think it's really, really important information. If all you hear is the mainstream media talking about how glorious Elizabeth Warren's plans are and that she's going to provide everything for everyone via government, it's not going to bode well for us in 2020. We need to remember the effects of these social programs, and that's taking opportunity away from middle-class Americans and business owners, small business owners and large business owners alike, to succeed and achieve the American dream. So thank you for strapping in and listening to that. And now we got to get to Howl About That, where I take a lone conservative article that I think is outstanding and give it a little shout out. So this week, we are going to be talking about Jeffrey Johnson's article. And, I got to shout out Jeffrey real quick. Jeffrey is one of our social media coordinators for the Elephant in the Room. He is a fantastic help to me. He is the one who's most likely operating the Elephant in the Room Twitter. If you follow, go give us a follow at TEITR_podcast for our tweets, so you can see clipped videos of me owning the libs, as well as get updates on when the show is going to be released and what we are up to. Anyway, Jeffrey's article, titled "The Faults of the Choose Love Movement," is about one of the lessons in the Jesse Lee Lewis Choose Love curriculum. And this organization was founded by Scarlett Lewis, whose son, Jesse, died in the Sandy Hook shootings attempting to save his classmates. So again, heart goes out to Scarlett Lewis, the entire Lewis family. We're so sorry for your loss, and we applaud the bravery of your young son, Jesse, who was taken from us far, far too soon. But back to Jeffrey's article. Jeffrey's article goes over a lesson about privilege and oppression, and apparently the lesson utilized the Pagan Macintosh white privilege checklist. So the article went fairly unnoticed for a couple of weeks until Scarlett Lewis's other son, JT Lewis, found it, and he then posted on Twitter that Lone Conservative wrote a totally fake news story about my mom's Choose Love movement that we created after my brother was murdered in the Sandy Hook elementary shooting. Do better. That tweet has since been deleted. And why has it been deleted? Well, it's because it's an opinion piece. It's not a news story. We're not writing a fake news story. Did they actually employ Peggy McIntosh's white privilege checklist? All sources say absolutely they have. Also, on a side note, just because the impetus for creating that organization is a tragic incident for which everyone grieves and everyone's heart goes out to this family, it doesn't mean that it's beyond criticism when we perceive that the organization's teaching curriculum goes beyond the bounds of its stated purpose. Jeffrey told me that the article had nothing in it accurate, and he actually put out a statement at the time saying he wrote this article and stand by it, and he watched the presentation at his school and know it's 100% true. He also stated in the article that he likes the curriculum for the most part, but this lesson in particular missed the mark. And so, of course, there were a few Twitter exchanges between Loco team members and those supporting the Lewis family. But I don't want to talk about any of the Twitter controversy. I want to get down to the meat of the article, because the meat of the article is very important. So let's see what Jeff said. He says, of the Choose Love curriculum for pre-K through 12th graders includes useful lessons about courage, gratitude, forgiveness, and other important life skills. But some, he says, are counterproductive. One lesson titled Courage, Privilege, and Oppression begins by having the students define and discuss where these terms are seen in society. The students then take an adapted version of activist Peggy McIntosh's famous white privilege checklist. Now, while this curriculum is supposed to unify and help school culture, blanketly labeling all white males as privileged is going to do nothing but harm, especially when disenfranchised teen white males are the most likely to cause violence at a school. These individuals don't see themselves as privileged, and they usually aren't. Many have had unstable family lives and are even suicidal. So telling these people that they've had an easier life by shaking a finger at them will only isolate them further. And here, Jeffrey is absolutely right. If we keep alienating one another based not on the content of our character, but on the color of our skin, and fail to recognize each one of our experiences, we're going to end up with an even more divided country with an even weaker societal fabric than the one that we have right now. And Jeffrey agrees. We should be supporting these students by listening to their stories, not minimizing them on the basis of race. And this curriculum should be aiming to encourage students to listen to other stories and ideas rather than telling them that certain students have it easier based on nothing but immutable characteristics. Jeffrey hit the nail on the head with this article. I will stand by Jeffrey. Hopefully for the rest of his pieces, but definitely for the rest of the 10 years as he works for this podcast. So Jeffrey, keep up the great work. You're doing great things. And thank you so much for your help on this podcast. And if you're interested in donating to Lone Conservative, go to loneconservative.com. At the top of the webpage, you will see a button, donate. Click on that button, help contribute to Lone Conservative. We need to bring more students than ever to CPAC this year, 2020, because it's a very important election year, if you didn't already know. All right, that does it for us over at the Elephant in the Room with Bradley Devlin for episode 6. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you again next time.